Welcome back to the day. Today we will learn about the shocking transformation of Theo DiMera and the sinister conspiracy that threatens to resurrect Salem's most feared patriarch through the most unexpected vessel. The return of a changed man. Theo Carver has returned to Salem after a 2-year absence in South Africa, but something fundamental has shifted within this once innocent young man. The Theo who departed Salem was a gentle soul, protective of his family yet reluctant to embrace the darker aspects of his DiMera heritage. However, the Theo who now walks the corridors of the DiMera mansion carries himself with an unsettling confidence, displaying characteristics that eerily mirror his late grandfather Stefano DiMera's calculating demeanor. This dramatic personality transformation has not gone unnoticed by those closest to him. Family members who once knew Theo as compassionate and morally grounded now observe him with growing concern as he demonstrates an unprecedented interest in DiMera Enterprises' operations. The young man who once shunned the family's criminal legacy now speaks eloquently about business strategies and corporate takeovers, using terminology and tactics that would make even his grandfather proud. Tony and EJ's masterful deception. Behind Theo's startling metamorphosis lies a carefully orchestrated conspiracy involving Tony DiMera and EJ DiMera, two master manipulators who have spent months preparing their unsuspecting pawn for his ultimate destiny. Tony, who initially appeared to support Gabby Hernandez's claim to the CEO position, has been secretly grooming Theo for a far more sinister purpose than mere corporate leadership. The conspiracy began during Theo's time in South Africa, where Tony and EJ maintained regular contact under the guise of family concern and business mentorship. Through subtle psychological manipulation and carefully planted suggestions, they gradually shifted Theo's perspective on his DiMera legacy, convincing him that embracing his grandfather's ruthless approach was not only necessary but noble. EJ, drawing from his own complex relationship with Stefano, understood precisely which emotional buttons to press to awaken the dormant DiMera darkness within Theo's psyche. The Stefano chip implantation. The most horrifying aspect of Tony and EJ's scheme involves the technological resurrection of Stefano DiMera through advanced neural implantation technology, reminiscent of Dr. Rolf's previous brainwashing experiments. Working in collaboration with underground medical specialists, they have developed a sophisticated microchip containing Stefano's downloaded consciousness, memories, and strategic thinking patterns. This revolutionary device, implanted during what Theo believed was routine medical treatment for lingering effects from his previous paralysis, now sits dormant in his brain, awaiting full activation. The chip contains not only Stefano's vast knowledge of criminal enterprises and manipulation techniques but also his specific memories of past schemes, enemy weaknesses, and hidden DiMera assets scattered across the globe. Once fully operational, this technological marvel will grant Stefano unprecedented control over Theo's actions, thoughts, and decision-making processes while maintaining the appearance of Theo's own free will. Paulina's unwitting role. Ironically, Paulina Price has become an unwitting accomplice in Tony and EJ's sinister plot by enthusiastically encouraging Theo to accept DiMera's lucrative job offer. Believing that her son needs someone with stronger moral principles to guide the company toward legitimate business practices, Paulina has no understanding of the true nature of the position being offered to Theo. Her maternal pride blinds her to the subtle changes in Theo's personality and speech patterns that began manifesting shortly after his return to Salem. When Paulina speaks passionately about Theo bringing ethical leadership to DiMera Enterprises, she unknowingly advocates for placing her son directly into the hands of those who seek to exploit his trusting nature and family loyalty. Her genuine desire to see Theo succeed professionally has made her the perfect advocate for Tony and EJ's carefully crafted narrative about corporate reform and family responsibility. Gabby's impending betrayal. Gabby Hernandez, who struck what she believed was a binding agreement with Tony DiMera regarding her ascension to the CEO position, remains completely unaware of the elaborate deception being orchestrated against her. Her recent romantic entanglement with EJ DiMera, born from her desire for revenge against Stefan's betrayal, has provided additional leverage for Tony and EJ to manipulate the corporate succession narrative. Tony's cryptic references to the rightful CEO taking over have been carefully designed to mislead Gabby into believing he refers to her eventual leadership while actually preparing Salem for Theo's installation as the new corporate figurehead. The betrayal will be particularly devastating for Gabby, who has invested considerable emotional and professional capital in her DiMera takeover plans, only to discover that she was never seriously considered for the position. Chad's strategic manipulation. Chad DiMera, whether consciously or unconsciously, has become another valuable asset in Tony and EJ's manipulation scheme through his public endorsement of Theo's leadership potential. His stated belief that DiMera Enterprises requires a younger leader with fresh ideas, who hasn't been part of the recent CEO turnover cycle, perfectly aligns with the narrative that Tony and EJ have constructed around Theo's candidacy. Chad's genuine admiration for Theo's moral character and family loyalty makes his endorsement particularly powerful within Salem's business community. When Chad speaks about the company needing someone who hasn't been corrupted by previous power struggles, he unknowingly promotes the very candidate who will soon become the vessel for Salem's most notorious villain. The romantic complication. The emerging romantic storyline between Theo and Ariana Horton adds another layer of complexity to the unfolding conspiracy. Ari's attraction to slightly older men and her apparent compatibility with Theo creates an emotional anchor that Tony and EJ can exploit to keep their pawn firmly committed to remaining in Salem. This budding relationship also positions Ari as an unwitting barrier between Gabby and Theo when the truth about the CEO succession finally emerges. As Gabby's daughter, Ari will find herself caught between family loyalty and romantic attachment, creating the perfect conditions for the kind of intergenerational conflict that has always fueled the most compelling DiMera family drama. The Phoenix rises again. As the Stefano chip gradually integrates with Theo's neural pathways, Salem residents will begin witnessing the emergence of characteristics and decision-making patterns that eerily echo the legendary Phoenix's most notorious traits. The young man who once represented hope for a more ethical DiMera generation will slowly transform into a sophisticated predator, combining Theo's natural charm and perceived innocence with Stefano's calculating ruthlessness and strategic brilliance. The genius of Tony and EJ's plan lies in its gradual implementation, allowing Salem's residents to attribute Theo's increasingly assertive behavior to natural maturation and business acumen rather than recognizing the technological resurrection of their most feared adversary. By the time anyone realizes the true nature of Theo's transformation, Stefano's consciousness will have achieved complete dominance over his grandson's body and mind, giving the Phoenix the perfect cover for his most ambitious revenge scheme yet. Theo's anger boils over. A painful confrontation about JJ's return. On Days of Our Lives, emotions ran high as Theo made his way into Jada's office, carrying the weight of old wounds that had never truly healed. His visit was not one of casual conversation or friendly catching up, it was driven by something much deeper, something that still lived raw in his memory, the shooting that changed his life. And at the center of his pain stood JJ, the man who had pulled the trigger. From the moment Theo stepped inside, it was clear he wasn't there to mince words. He went straight to the point, telling Jada that she had made a grave mistake in hiring JJ back onto the force. The accusation hung in the air, heavy with bitterness. Theo wasn't just questioning a decision, he was reliving his trauma, demanding to know how such a thing could happen. Jada, ever calm and steady in her position, acknowledged immediately that she was aware of the incident. She knew about the shooting, the investigation, and the fallout that followed. But she also did what many viewers were likely thinking in that moment. She asked Theo the obvious question. Hadn't he already forgiven JJ? Hadn't that chapter been closed years ago? Theo's answer revealed the heartbreaking truth. Yes, he had forgiven JJ, but not because the pain vanished, and not because the memory disappeared. He forgave JJ because JJ had accepted responsibility and stepped away from the badge. That act, that choice, had given Theo some sense of closure. It allowed him to believe that JJ recognized the weight of what had happened, that he knew his actions had consequences too heavy to ignore. For Theo, forgiveness came with the understanding that JJ would not continue down the same path. But now, with JJ returning to the force, that fragile peace had been shattered. Theo's forgiveness had been based on a certain reality, and that reality no longer existed. Jada listened with compassion, and for a moment, the viewer could see the struggle on her face. She wanted to reassure Theo, to let him know that this wasn't a reckless decision. She explained that JJ had gone through extensive background checks, that he had undergone cultural sensitivity training, and that the shooting, while tragic, had been officially deemed clean. Her words were meant to comfort, but they rang hollow in Theo's ears. To him, no amount of paperwork or training could erase what had happened. And then, Theo's voice cracked through the tension with an even deeper frustration. This wasn't just about the shooting, or the policies, or the legal justifications. This was personal. JJ had been his friend. And as a friend, Theo believed, JJ owed him the courtesy of a conversation before making the choice to put on the badge again. That betrayal cut even deeper than the fear. In Theo's eyes, JJ's silence spoke volumes. It felt like a dismissal of the pain he carried every day. The scene became almost unbearable in its intensity. Theo's emotions were raw, his words a mixture of anger and grief. He wasn't just advocating for himself, he insisted that this was about protecting others, about ensuring that no one else would suffer the way he had. His plea was clear: watch him. Don't let him hurt anyone else. It was heartbreaking because, beneath the fury, there was still a trace of the young man who once trusted JJ, who once believed in him as a friend. That trust had been fractured, and now Theo stood torn between past bonds and present fears. Jada, despite her sympathy, could not bend to Theo's demands. She would not fire JJ, not for this reason, not at Theo's urging alone. As the head of her department, she had to trust in the system she was upholding. But she did not dismiss Theo either. She promised to keep an eye on things, to remain vigilant. It wasn't the resolution Theo had hoped for, but it was all she could offer. Still, the damage was done. Theo left the office furious, his heart heavy with disappointment. Viewers could see it written all over his face. This was not the closure he had sought. Instead, it reopened wounds he had fought so hard to scar over. His frustration wasn't just with JJ, but with the system, with the way things were explained away by phrases like deemed clean. For Theo, the reality was simpler and harsher. A bullet had changed his life forever, and now the man who fired it was being given the chance to carry a gun again. This confrontation left fans shaken, not only because of the heated exchange, but because of what it represented. Soap operas often thrive on love triangles and secret affairs, but this storyline carried a weight of its own. It was about trust, trauma, and the difficulty of moving on when the past refuses to stay buried. For long-time viewers who remember the original shooting storyline, the scene hit especially hard. It reminded us that forgiveness is never simple, and that the scars of violence don't fade just because someone says, "I'm sorry." Theo's final words, a plea mixed with warning, echoed in the silence of Jada's office long after he was gone: keep an eye on him. To Theo, this wasn't just about friendship lost. It was about justice, accountability, and the hope that no one else would ever experience the same pain. As this chapter unfolds, one thing is certain: Theo's anger isn't going away anytime soon. His fury is more than personal resentment. It's a voice for the wounded, a challenge to the idea of second chances, and a reminder that in Salem, the past has a way of crashing into the present, no matter how hard the characters try to move forward.